The Ranch Rolodex is where ranching, business, and relationships come together. Hosted by Derek Jackson, Zach Hobson, and Daniel Unruh, the show is built around conversations with the people who know what it means to start from nothing and build something real. Every episode pulls a new contact from the Ranch Rolodex, the kind of people you would call when there's a problem to solve, a deal to make, or wisdom to pass down. Their stories about grit and faith, risk and stewardship, and the relationships that build ranches, businesses, and communities from the ground up. Welcome to the Ranch Rolodex.
Welcome back to the Ranch Rolodex. I think sometimes we get caught in paradigms in agriculture where we think we have to do things a certain way because that's the way they've always been done. And our guest today pretty much squashes that paradigm and has a good story to tell us about kind of making your own way and making the best life you can with what you have. I've been inspired by it, and I think you guys will too. So, Toby Holsted, welcome to the Ranch Rolodex.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, glad we could have you here. You know, Zach and Dan and I got acquainted with you through Executive Link. Boy, we've leaned on you for a lot more than that, and so I appreciate it. And that's the whole idea with the podcast, is that we share with our listeners people that have helped us. So we're glad to have you here and kind of talk about your story and draw out some things that we can there.
Well, I appreciate it.
Well, let's start with that. Let's start with some foundation. Let's start with where you're from, what you went through, and how you got to be where you're at today.
So I am from Mountain View, Oklahoma, which is a little town of about 750 people down in the kind of the southwestern quadrant of the state. Quite a bit of farming in that area. Grew up as, sure enough, a farm kid. We had cotton and wheat and a few cows and a lot of alfalfa, and just kind of did all of that. When I went to college for a year, and I did not let college get in the way of my education. I learned a lot of things in that short year. But anyway, I came back, and there wasn't really room on the farm for me without adding some enterprises. So we started doing a lot of custom swathing and baling, sprigging Bermuda grass, did a lot of that. And, you know, there'd always been a handful of stockers and a handful of cows around. But that was really the only place where there was room for growth was with cattle.
That seems to be typical. You know, I don't mean to cut you off there, but there's just things in your story that I think that we have more things in common with people than what we think. I think too often we get siloed in our own little hole and we think, oh, it's just me, you know, but there's a lot of operations where, you know, the next generation comes back and it's like, well, you can, but you're going to have to make your own way. You know, you're going to have to bring your own income when you come back. And so sounds similar with your story.
Yeah. And I don't think that's a bad thing at all. I think if you're going to come, you need to provide value. So, you know, at the time, this would have been 97 or so when I came back. We were buying cutting bulls from out of the southeast, you know, 6-weight bulls, weigh 650. They cost, say, 85, 87 cents. Contract them right back at 750, 490, or 80, you know, 78 to 81 purchase. We were rolling them up about 3 cents a pound. And all you had to do was keep them alive.
Right. Well, you had to do some surgery in there too, but keep them alive.
It was wild. And, you know, a lot of them, they would have looked really at home down in Zach's country. Lots of ear, lots of humps. Had some stuff come out of the Florida swamps. So it was an experience. And, you know, we'd always had horses growing up, and I'd roped a little bit, but I was no part of a cowboy. But when we started this deal, we didn't really have any facilities. My dad said, well, if you want to do it, there's the horse, there's the rope, there's the medicine, there's the cattle. You figure this stuff out because I'm too busy doing other stuff. And we figured it out. I still have some bumps and bruises from it. But
yeah, well, that's another thing that is common, I think, among lots of people that have an idea or want to build something or do something is figuring it out. We've definitely had that here. None of us knows anything about how to record a podcast. And thank God we got some help on a producer, you know, but as far as this equipment and stuff, like none of us knows what we're doing. And at some point it's like, well, the show must go on. We're going to do the best we can, figure it out.
The only way to get good at something is to be willing to be bad at it.
Yeah, right.
So And I was very bad at that for quite a spell.
Yeah. Well, you turned out to be a pretty good hand, I guess, because you take care of a lot of cows for a lot of people now, don't you?
Yeah, I've got 2 operations that I manage, one for share and one for just kind of wages, and then I help on a lot of others.
Well, don't let me skip past all your story though. So back then you were doing cutting bulls and roping them and doing it that way.
Yeah, and we did that for a number of years. Like I said, we started and I had done a few before I left for college. I quit school, came back in 97, cranked it up, and I'd say probably in about 03, we were really rolling and had started building what I thought was an empire that I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
We managed everything with hard work and harsh words.
Yeah, right.
But it was building, and when you're building, you don't have to do that much managing because there's always cash.
Yeah.
Always get a little bit more money. There's always something being sold.
Yeah. Yeah. And with the business that you described, that's not exactly custom work because you guys were owning them, but it is a quick turnover. And so there's always, what'd you have them 60, 90 days to straighten them out and get them 100 pounds on them?
Yeah, about 75 would be the average, and it was so easy. We had lots and lots of wheat pasture. So all fall and winter, early spring, they were out on wheat. In the summertime, we had a bunch of self-feeders out there. Corn was just dirt cheap. So we were mixing corn and a Remington pellet and a protein pellet and having it delivered from the local co-op.
Mm-hmm.
They're doing right at 2 pounds a day on just that with no hay. And, it was easy. There was a lot of inputs,
and this is still in connection with your family and what they were doing.
Yep.
And that includes your dad. Was there any siblings or anybody else involved?
No. So there's a pile of us. I've got 2 full sisters, and they were up in Kansas. So my folks had divorced when I was like 6 or 7, and I'd moved to Leavenworth with my mom, Leavenworth, Kansas. And when I was 13, I moved back and started helping my dad on the farm. Then I've got a half brother with my dad, or on my dad's side, but he's 13 years younger than I am. So he was never really he was just in the way.
Right.
He and my dad are partners now and do a really good job at what they're doing. But he got to have a different dad than I had because it was different stages in life, which is just, it is what it is.
Yeah. We've talked about that. Carrie and I have talked about that. We've got 2 boys and it's like, they're very, very different. And we've talked about that a little bit in terms of what you just said. It's like, well, they had different parents, When we were first-time parents, we were way different than the second time around. And so anyways, you just do the best you can and hope you don't mess them up too bad.
Just make them more messed up in a different way than you are.
That's right. Yeah.
That's kind of the goal.
So 2003, we're setting the world on fire with cutting bulls.
Yeah, things are really rolling good. Markets are good. That was about the time that we started scaling up enough that we were really starting to add in some infrastructure. Had hired a guy to help do some welding and things. Prior to that, it just pretty much been my dad and I and whatever cheap labor we could get. Then we hired a guy who's a good friend of mine. So he was actually best man at my wedding, a man named Matt Harrison. So that allowed us to really scale up.
Yeah, so he was doing welding. Were you building pins or what was going on there?
We were building pins and
fixing broke stuff.
At that time in 03, we were probably farming 3,000 acres or so of wheat, probably 300 or 400 acres of alfalfa. Had pretty much quit any row crop at that point. But the wheat, I'd say 80, 90% of that would either be grazed out or baled.
Yeah.
And then we had some summer crops. We'd grow Sudan for hay, for whatever. And then we had a 3-row, 40-inch sprigger. So covers 120 inches. Pull it about 3 miles an hour. Had an old man that would drive it and a couple of natives that would fork roots into the back of it. And we were doing about 500 acres a year with that. And
that crop is?
So Bermuda grass is it's a warm season grass. Probably doesn't grow up here, but from the Oklahoma line south, it's just everywhere. It's one of those introduced grasses that the worse you treat it, the better it likes it.
We call that fescue here.
Well, it's similar. It's really, really responsive to nitrogen. It's a sod grass that produces through sprigs and runners, so you can't really graze it out. It is possible. I have seen it done, but it's hard.
You got to try.
Yeah, it takes a massive amount of neglect to kill it.
Yeah, all the things you mentioned here are all just farming feed for cattle, sounds like.
That's exactly what we were doing.
Yeah, very good.
And then that was all pretty much the same until about 2011.
Okay.
And in 2011, so the late 90s, early 2000s, they were all very wet years, like 35-inch rainfall years were our 30-year averages. Anyway, in 2011, we went from getting 30, 35 inches of rain to 11 inches. And the cattle markets were shifting also. And 2011 is also about the time that I met Heidi, who would eventually become my wife. Okay. But she was in Louisiana and I was in Oklahoma, and it became very evident that if I was going to have any other kind of life than what I had, things were going to have to change.
Yeah.
And also, through all the 2000s, we were always growing a little bit. I think in 2011, we were farming about 5,000 acres of wheat, and we're turning about 7,000 head of those cutting bulls a year, and had a couple other full-time hands, but and would get some day labor, day help for the cattle too, but mostly it was just me and Matt on the cattle end. And then,
did you have facilities by then, or are you doing 7,000 on horseback?
We still roped and doctored everything.
Really?
Yeah, we used a dart gun some.
Yeah.
But yeah, as far as feed pens or anything like that, we had, there were 5 pens at my dad's house that we would receive into. We'd run them through the chute, work them, and keep them there maybe a day. And then they were hauled out to pasture.
Yeah. And is this 7,000 head in 90 days or 100 days? I mean, that
through the course of a year, there'd be 7,000.
Okay. So where were they when the graze out wheat wasn't ready, or like in October or July?
So we had a bunch of little grass traps and pastures, and they were just stockpiled different places.
I see.
But there was no feedlot pens. And I bet we didn't buy 500 head of preconditioned calves that whole time.
Right.
If one time truck pulls up to unload, and Matt, who was working for me, and a big funny guy, he goes to rummage around in the vet shack, and he grabs a pack of scalpels. He carries it out and he hands it to the truck driver. Truck driver says, "What am I supposed to do with this?" He said, "Give one to every farmer you meet." I don't think it worked, but
yeah, right. Yeah. Can you hold a knife and can you count to 2?
Yes. Yeah. So, like I say, it was hard work and harsh words. And in 11, we'd been trying to buy some little better cattle and had been buying some cattle locally out of sale barns and stuff, because the flow from the cattle from the southeast had slowed down a little bit. A lot of those old people had aged out, and there was a lot of little farms that were going back to timber.
Interesting.
They're still there, but there's enough fewer of them that the price difference wasn't quite what it had been. And that was also about the time that I bought some really nice bull calves off a gentleman, straight off the cow. And I said, "Hey, what do you want for those heifers?" I'd never ran heifers before in my life.
Yeah.
But they were exceptionally nice, and I was ready to try something different. Wonder what it'd be like to have cows.
Yeah.
So made them into cows. So I've done a little bit of everything with them.
Very good. So what year are we in now when you started bringing in the heifers?
That would have been 11 and 12.
11 and 12. So now you're kind of transitioning from the cutter bulls into having some cows around.
Mm-hmm.
What comes after that?
So I got married in 12, and in 11, 12, and 13 were all that operation with my dad had fallen apart in what we had always been doing. It was no longer working.
Right.
So we were still swathing and baling hay. We were still had farming. We still had stockers. We had a few cows, but it wasn't really throwing off the cash that it had in the past. Matt, who'd been working for us for quite a while at that time, is offered a job as a manager at the co-op. It's a lot more stable deal. It's more money than I can pay him. And through the drought, I didn't really have enough to keep him there either.
Yeah.
There was. I just didn't know how to marshal the business.
Right.
In my mind, there wasn't room. So 12, I get married, trying to figure things out. 13, July of 13, my boy is born.
Mm-hmm. It's life-changing, isn't it?
It is a life-changing event. So just kind of as a funny aside, my wife, she tells me she's pregnant. For 9 months, she tells me she's pregnant. I am visibly aware that she is pregnant, and there is going to be another life come into our lives. But mentally and emotionally, I was not prepared for the feeling that I would have when I held him. And so we go to the hospital. She has him, winds up with an emergency C-section. After a very long, strenuous labor, they put him in the incubator because he was 9 pounds and 3 ounces, I think. So apparently my family comes from the same part of England that the Hereford cattle breed originated.
Yeah.
So we're bad-headed, high birth weight, and pretty early maturing.
Okay, very good.
Pretty similar deal. Anyway, he gets metaflighted to Oklahoma City, which is about 70 miles from the hospital he's born at. We spent 13 days in the NICU. And through that time, I have a lot of time to reflect and think about who I am, who I want to be, and how things are at home. And want to change things, but don't have any tools for it.
There's probably a lot of people that feel the exact same way. They know something's wrong. They'd like to change it, but you just don't know how. And it's probably because you haven't connected with the right person yet that can help you out of it.
That's exactly right. You can't believe it until you see it.
Right.
And sometimes you can't see it until you believe it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a catch-22 there, but there has to be somebody in your life that you can look at and say, I like how he lives. I like the person that he is, not necessarily what he does or what he has, but how he lives.
Exactly right.
And I didn't really have that.
Yeah. Well, how'd you find it? Where'd it come from?
Ranching for Profit.
Yeah.
So the week that my boy turned a year old, I took my first RFP class in Oklahoma City. And Wally Olson was taking it for either the fifth or sixth time.
Some of us, it takes more than once, huh? I took it twice, and I'd like to go back.
I've paid 3 times, helped teach it twice,
right,
and just kind of audited it once. And I still can't tell you everything that's in it. And I think you learn different things every time you go.
Yeah.
Because you need different things when you go.
You're a different person. Like you talked about your dad and Carrie and I as we were parents and stuff. As life goes on, you're a different person at different stages of life that has different strengths and also different weaknesses. So yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. So, took the class and thought I learned a lot. Thought I learned a huge amount. And I did. I came home and started trying to implement some things. So I took it in July, and in November was my first EL meeting.
So you went straight into EL after taking the class because you can't join Executive Link until you've taken Ranching for Profit, which is a good thing because you need to learn kind of the structure of Ranching for Profit before you can be effective in Executive Link. But you went right into it because some of us, I took the class twice and then still waffled about getting in before I got in. But
so I took the class, and I'd been home probably 3 weeks and got a phone call from Dave Pratt. And I kind of was sort of interested in it, and I'd talked to my wife about it a little bit, but everything was so new. We'd been married for 2 years. We had a year-old boy, and and I'd came home from that class with all kinds of wild ideas like, hey, we're just going to move. We're going to move away from here and get away from all this nonsense that we don't want to be a part of. And she calmed me down a lot.
Yeah.
We'll get back into some of that other stuff, but one of the ways that she calmed me down, and I have used this on other people in my facilitation, is if we can't leave until we resolve some of the issues here.
Right.
Because if we leave, we have to be going towards something. We can't be leaving and running from something. And I think that's probably one of the wisest things she could have told me.
Yeah. And so just to shed some light on that. So in Executive Link, there's chapters that are made up of boards, and a board has 6 businesses on it, and a board meets 3 times a year. And in those meetings, there's a facilitator that helps the meeting along. And that's something that you're a part of now as a facilitator, like you mentioned. But anyways, but yeah, that's a good point, that I think we probably take whatever we have with us. If you haven't fixed it, you're just going to take it to the next place. So that's a good point. Now, you mentioned Wally was in the class the first time you took it. What's the significance there?
So Wally was coming back. The Kelly Ranch that he was managing was kind of in a state of transition. They didn't know for sure what they were going to do with it. So he had came back with one of the owner's sons, or anyway, just to see what was going to be. And also, he wanted to start teaching the sell-by marketing. And he told me, he said, Dave Pratt, for all of his faults, is the best teacher that I know, so I'm going to go pay attention to how he teaches.
So you got acquainted with Wally there.
Yeah, and so he would put on a little seminar, I guess, after hours, kind of practicing what he was wanting to teach. So I got to know him through that pretty well, and tried to have breakfast with him every morning. Yeah. And then when he got ready to have his first class, he was generous enough to call me up and said, hey, I'm going to have a kind of a preschool, a run through of this. Would you be interested in sitting in on it and kind of critiquing me? I said, yes, please. So
you bet. There's something there, man, I remember the first time I was in Ranching for Profit, there was a lot said about just the type of people that were in the room and getting yourself in those rooms with those kind of people. And so I imagine that's part of what you were thinking when Wally said, hey, I'm going to have this class. Would you come? Because those are the people that I want to be around, those forward thinking, accountable, we can change it. We can do better. We can help each other. That's the circle you want to be in. And so if it costs, if it doesn't cost, if you have to drive across country, like whatever it is, get there.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And then, we kind of hung out and we talked, and he picked my brain a little bit. And he found something that was worth exploring anyway. And we were in business for another number of years. I learned a lot from Wally, not just on how to conduct business, but how to conduct relationships.
Right.
How to treat people that you're in business with, holding them accountable, but you don't have to be a prick about it.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's good. It sounds like, and at this point, it sounded like Dave Pratt got a hold of you about EL and you joined in there. And so you've been to Ranching for Profit. You're in the Executive Link program. You're learning from Wally. You're doing some business with Wally. About what year are we at here?
So 15 along in there. And so came home from Ranching for Profit, and I thought that I understood what I was taught.
Yeah.
What I came home with was a bunch of practices.
Yeah.
I didn't quite pick up the principles.
Yeah. Yep. I had that same way. I, mentioned this in the episode with Dallas, but when they taught the 3 secrets to increasing profit, you can reduce your overheads, increase your gross margin per unit, or do more turnover. And I was just convinced that it had to happen in that order.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a prescription to say that ye must do, in this order. And man, depending on the operation, your overheads may be fine. You may need to work on more turnover, or, like in a feedlot, the gross margin might be terrible because of so many direct costs, but the turnover is so good. You know what I mean? It's
matter.
Like,
yeah.
Exactly right. It's like you've got 3 levers to pull, and there's no pull this one first or that one last. It's just whatever you do. And so I had a little bit of the same thing. That's probably a plug to not take it once and think you know it all. But to take it once and think about it for a while and try to apply it for a while, then maybe take the class again and, talk to different people. And because they really are, they're principles that are not prescriptions.
And I think when you take it, you should take your spouse or your partner or whoever. We'll get into that in a minute. So, I took the class in 14, was still farming quite a bit, had stockers and stuff, and officially separated away from my father.
In 14?
In 14. And there was a lot of bitterness on both sides there for a while. Still is. There's a lot of that's healed up, but a lot of it is just letting go.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some things here that are not uncommon to agriculture, and that is doing business with your family, hard work and harsh words. There's a lot of things that I think we think this is just the way this industry works, and I think that you've done a very good job of showing that it doesn't have to be that way.
Well, and I have to give a lot of credit there to my wife. So she grew up in South Louisiana. Her dad's an ag teacher. Her mom's a band director. There's some ag in her family, but she comes from with a very inquisitive mind, and she's a nurse. So it's very evidence-based practices. So I would say what I was going to do, and she'd say, why? I said, well, that's just what I do. But why do you do it that way? Well, that's because we've always done it that way. Well, why did you start doing it that way? I don't know.
Yeah, right. The guy before me did it this way. Yeah.
And she'd say, well, should you really be doing it if you don't know why you're doing it?
Thank God for wives.
Thank God for wives. But, after a little bit of that, it's like, why am I doing it that way? And, a perfect example of that was, everybody around there was calving in early February. So when I had cows, that's when I bred them for.
Yeah.
That's just what you do, and go to RFP and I see the deal. I was like, why are we doing that? Well, there's got to be a reason. Well, it's a screwworm, which might be a thing coming up, but for 40 years, it has not been.
Right. Yeah.
And
yeah, there's a balance there too, because I think that specifically in ranching for profit and kind of that circle, there's a lot of talk like I have done today about not being constrained by paradigms. But some of those things that people have done for generations were done for good reason. So we got to balance this thing about like not doing it the way Grandpa did with, well, Grandpa also probably knew more than you do, So
I have a saying that goes along with that. It's the slowest way to go broke ranching is to do everything the way that Grandpa did. The fastest way to go broke ranching is to forget that Grandpa had a reason for what he did.
Yeah, right.
The only way to make money is somewhere in between.
That's right. Yeah, there's two ditches there.
Yeah, you have to, if you can figure out why Grandpa was doing something, you can figure out how to do it to fit your modern problems.
Right. Yeah, very good. So picking up from there, you've separated. I'm assuming there's a lot of lease ground here. Your cows, are you doing any custom work? Well, for Wally, you're doing some work for Wally.
Yeah, I've got custom cows with Wally. You have to remember this was 14, so cows were worth a lot of money.
Right. Yeah.
So I came home. So I wrote a hot check. I paid an insufficient funds fee on my ranching for profit tuition because I was in that big a bind. Yeah. So I came home and went to selling things. We sold all the equipment that I thought that I could get rid of. Come to find out, I could get rid of all of it. It just took me 3 years from the time I took the class to get rid of the last piece of machinery. But I sold all of my fall calving cows. I sold some 3-in-1s, just a little small group of them for $5,000 a piece. And this is 14, so I have fixed my cash flow problems.
Here we go.
Yeah, I got the world by the tail.
Sun shining from now on out.
Yeah, and there's a video of on RFP of me taking, 15 or 16, and I'm still just got rainbows shooting out my rear.
Yeah.
I didn't know how much I didn't know.
Yeah.
Because I've made a lot more mistakes since then.
Well, and one thing too that I don't want to paint the wrong picture in your story is that ranching for profit doesn't necessarily teach go home and sell everything. But you've got to examine your operation, and I think lots of times we're running on with too many overheads. We've got too much iron, for what we're trying to do.
And so the only thing that I will say that I got 100% right coming out of my first Ranching for Profit school was a mission and vision.
Yeah, there you go.
My wife and I sat down and we got that hammered out because, well, when Dave called and said, hey, would you want to go to Executive Link? And I talked her into it. We got the packet of all the things, and she had not been to the class. So she finds the list of things that we need done. And she says, sit down, we're going to do this, because I'm not showing up unprepared.
And I see a lot of these principles are also universal in business. I've seen other very successful and popular businesses and business people talk about having classes and whatever. And it's the same type of things, And I think even outside of business, like we have to have a vision, a specific vision of what we want in order to be effective about going after what we want. And that mission and vision, man, that thing is powerful, because I'll tell you one thing that it's been difficult for me on is, you write this mission and vision about like who you are and what you do, and also what you want, like what that perfect world looks like. And then I say to my wife, like, man, I really want to buy this 160. And she's like, why? It's not your mission or vision to own land, and it's like, well, that stinks. And it's not to say that you can't, but you know what I mean? Like, it's a good measure to bounce everything off of. Like, why do you want this so bad? It's not your mission or vision,
No, it absolutely is. It should be the lens that you view everything through.
Right. Yep. Okay. So here we are. We're on our way. We're in Executive Link, got some cows doing some custom work. We've taken off the golden handcuffs, I suppose, and now you're out doing your own thing. Where do we go from there?
Oh, so I think in 17, I sold the last tractor. And so part of my dream was to get off the tractors, quit burning diesel, and to just be a grass-based business, because farming was never what I loved. And I've got a pretty tore up back, and to sit still in a tractor for hours on end. And I think a lot of my frustrations just kind of land there too. But we had achieved that goal. Everything was grass. Even the lease country was grass. Some of it was not really planted to grass. We just stopped farming, stopped doing anything, and we grazed what was there. Caused some hard feelings with some landlords, lost some country because of it, but I was able to keep the pieces that mattered, and it opened up doors to other things that I'd never dreamed possible. But in 17, I took the class again with my wife. She'd been in EL for 3 years, I guess, and might have been 18. It was interesting. After the first full day, my wife and I are sitting in the hotel room and we're talking, and I said, I think they changed the curriculum. She said, what do you mean? I said, well, everything after about noon, that was all. I don't remember any of that. And she said, yeah, about 11 o'clock, they quit talking about things that I've heard you talk about before. I said, I really think they've changed the curriculum. Well, turns out they didn't change the curriculum at all. Every day, sometime between 11 and 2, I would have an epiphany, and I completely shut my mind off. I did not hear anything the rest of the class. So
right.
Even though I was there for the full 7 days, I got about 3 days worth of information. And that's part of the reason that you have to take it again and again and again. The first time I came away with a bunch of practices and a few principles. The second time I picked up some principles. And my wife and I had a shared vocabulary.
There you go.
And that was kind of life-changing. So without EL, I never would have had to sit still and listen when she asked, why are you doing that?
Right.
I'd have been able to go, well, I don't know. I ain't got time for this, and go out the door. Whereas in EL, you just sit there and everybody's looking at you.
Kind of take it.
As well as everything.
Right,
it's an uncomfortable thing.
And it's the best thing for you.
Well, it was for me. EL gave me permission to have hard conversations. It gave me tools to have hard conversations. Yep. And it also showed me the benefits of actually having the conversation, and that it does not have to be combative.
Yeah, that's one thing that went across my mind a few times in your story, is that I think that this happens also, like this is true also in the lives of people that are potentially listening. You can be in business with somebody and you gotta stop being in business with them. And it's not a zero sum game. It doesn't mean there's one person that's right and there's one person that's wrong, or there's a winner and a loser or whatever. You both can be right and you both can need to be separate in business. You know what I mean? And so that's one thing that I think is true in partnerships and families and all this sort of stuff and hard conversations, is that like it can be such where it's like you and I need to not do business anymore together. That doesn't mean you're a bad person. Doesn't mean I'm a bad person. This just isn't working.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's 100% right. I carried a lot of blame for that family operation failing.
Right.
A lot of it falls on me. Not all of it, but a lot of it. But for a number of years, I didn't think I carried any blame, which made me a self-righteous prick.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think all of us have that tendency if we're not careful. And there's a lot of stuff out there today about ownership and, all that sort of stuff, which is helpful for us to consider. And I even think that, even in the way that I communicate with Carrie, it's better if she doesn't respond the way that I would like, that I would think about, well, how did you present it? What did you do? And so anyways, you're right on with all that. Okay. So now you're building this operation with your wife, still just one kid or?
No, by this time we've got two.
Okay. Yeah.
Eli was born in 13 and Landry Kate was born in 15.
So then when did you go from just being a consumer of ranching for profit and EL to participating in it as a facilitator and that type of stuff?
So right before Dallas bought the company, let me back up a little bit to the St. Joe School. You sit around at a table with people that you don't know, and they always try and blend repeat offenders with the new guys. And, so somebody's got a little bit of experience. So I had some really interesting people at my table and, was kind of able to lead discussions and help things along. And I felt comfortable and confident. And so, we had the little mock EL meeting there at the end. As we're driving home from that, I tell my wife, I said, I really think I could facilitate. I think I could do a good job at it. And she just says, oh, okay, and files it away. Well, a year or so later, Dallas is buying the company. We're in Colorado Springs. EL meeting's over. He says, hey, can you guys give me a ride to the airport to my plane? I said, sure. So Dallas gets in, Heidi's in the back seat, and we're just chatting around, talking about how things are going while he's buying the company and this and that. He says that he's going to be trying to find some more facilitators and people from inside the organization. Well, Heidi just pops her head up and says, hey, Toby would like to do that. And I wanted to crawl out the window because, it's just, oh, no.
Carrie does the same thing, man. She'll come and drop a bomb and then just like walk away, It's like, well, thanks, honey.
So we had just pulled up to Dallas's plane and he says, oh, well, yeah, we'll think about that. We'll see you guys.
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh, that was he's never going to call us. Well, that fall, he called and said, hey, would you like to try a meeting in Billings, Montana? Yes, sir, please. And I went and had some very successful meetings and a couple that they should have fired me for. So it's been a learning process ever since.
Yeah. Very good. Well, we had you as a facilitator for our summer meeting. And I think anytime that you have as many people as there are in Executive Link, there's going to be different types of personalities and all this sort of stuff. But we sure got along good with you. And I appreciate it. I think, for our group, where you've come from, but where you're at now is a place where you know how to have tact in a conversation, but also like you can just tell us how it is. When did you start facilitating meetings?
19, I think.
In 19. Gotcha.
Give or take. That's long enough ago. It's all a little bit fuzzy, but it was pre-COVID.
So then what are you doing? Has there been very many changes from 19 to today, or just more just refining what you got kind of lined out?
So it's been a lot of refinement. been some transitions. So the headquarters that I had operated on was some family land, and the understanding was that I could be there for as long as I wanted. And then they weren't happy with me not planting a crop, and I was not going to go back to planting a crop. So I had to move headquarters, had to essentially build a headquarters on a piece of ground that I owned that had a little gathering facility is all that it had. Within just a couple of months, we'd set up a chute, cut a hole in the fence, set up a bunch of panels, and the next project was I had been weaning calves for a guy for a number of years that had a cow herd down at Granfield, which is about 100 miles or so south of me, right on the Red River. Yeah. That gentleman lived in Tulsa, guy in Granfield took care of him, and the management was not the best down there. So, we would have, when they'd come in, those calves would be anywhere from what they missed last year to 250-pound babies.
Yeah.
I went down there once and cleaned it up for him, and then it was one of those things that it had to ride itself out. But right after we got that facility kind of, sort of, not really together, I got a call from the gentleman, said, "Hey, I'm pulling the plug on that deal down there. There should be about 300 cows and bulls and whatever calves and everything. Can you take them on your place, sort, situate, market, all of that for me?" Sure. So we got a whole bunch of Brangus cross cows and some purebred Charolais bulls and calves that were unmarked, unwinged, and unhandled. Just sorted and straightened that up. And that's what my business has been for really all my life. I have been a fixer. I fix problems. That's what we did with the cutting bulls. It's what I did when we were farming. I was the mechanic, the fixer.
Well, that's business.
That's business.
You get paid in relationship to the problem that you solve for somebody else. And sounds like that's what you were doing, is solving problems.
Yeah. And, when I go to the sale barn, I'm looking for a black baldy bull with horns.
Right.
There's more work for me and more chances to upgrade.
Yeah.
But, I did that, straightened those up, have ran custom cattle for that gentleman several other times. And there was I got a call from a guy whose dad, I've known his dad forever. He was a retired electrical engineer, had been a helicopter inspector, worked for NASA for a while. He was a brilliant man. Had a little family ranch. They'd always had horned Herefords. This gentleman was up in his 90s. Oh, I guess he was 89 and was in the hospital for a knee replacement. And his son called me up and he said, "Hey, Dad's in the hospital, so he can't say no. Would you come and gather everything and clean this stuff up? Because there's cows out there that have never been in the pen." We went out there and we gathered some 3 and 4 year old steers that they'd got gathered once. We gathered some horned Hereford bulls that were 7 or 8 years old that had never been in a pen, didn't have a mark on them, and everything in between. Bunch of old rogie cows that would just kind of walk through you, and some of them that would actually come and hunt you down. I've got a horse with a couple of scars and things from a horned cow that got us. Anyway, we cleaned that up. I had talked with the son quite a bit, who was in his 60s, and had talked to the old man a little bit and said, we all know that this is not sustainable the way you're doing it. Would you mind if I wrote you up a proposal on some other things that can happen? And at the time, I think all that they thought they could do was let it be what it was until John passed away. And then they were going to have to sell all the cow herd, either lease it out or sell it, because...
Yeah. Where'd you learn about writing a proposal?
Pulled it out of my nether regions. No.
Well, I think that's a good point, because you talked about the family operation, and listen, this probably happens a lot in family operations, is running off of this, well, I think, and well, I thought we had an understanding or whatever. And I think that that's something that has made my life a lot better. It's like, you want to do something in business, take them a proposal. And listen, I love the old handshake. my word is bond deal, but you just don't get into nearly as many problems of misunderstandings with a proposal.
Absolutely right. And what happens with the handshake is you said, I thought, you heard, we agreed, and nobody heard the exact same thing. We all interpreted it a little bit differently.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's
probably
down,
to our benefit, probably interpreted a little bit, to my benefit.
And it's not an intentional thing. It's just
it's human nature.
Human nature.
Right.
We are flawed creatures.
All right. So you got this proposal on the Hereford herd.
Wrote them a couple different options that we could do. You know, I could lease it. The herd could go away. The herd could stay. We could do a share of some form. And that's what we wound up doing is I provide labor and management and supplement. That way they're not out any money. I show them my sales receipts from my share of the calf crop, and they're able to deduct that from their taxes. So it works really well for them. You know, this is I guess next year will be 125 years that they've been on the place. The genetics that are there came with the people. So they get to keep all of that. But, you know, all of the kids grew up off the place.
Right.
You know, John had came back and taken over from an uncle when he retired. So none of those kids grew up there. They love it. They understand it, what it could be, but they don't know how it operates and don't have the time to.
Boy, and there's something there too, because we talk often about how the Achilles heel of ranchers is that we're emotionally attached to the idea of land ownership and to our cattle. And we think about it in negative terms, but I guess I hadn't thought about it in positive terms of a ranch owner, like what you're describing. There's something there that they're attached to. I mean, obviously they wanted the cows to stay, right? They want you to manage them because they don't have that skill set. They've been removed from it. But yeah, so that emotion is not purely negative all the time.
No, it is only negative if it costs you money.
Right. Yeah. And that's only if you're managing to make money, you know? And so there's just, again, it's like broken record. There's no prescriptions here. There's only principles.
I will say that you should never be in love with cows, with a cow.
Yeah.
You can be in love with a cow herd or you can be in love with the idea of cows, but you cannot be in love with a cow because they're going to die and they have to leave before they do.
Yeah, right. Exactly, you know? Right.
And if they're going to have to leave anyway, why not leave when they can make you the most money?
That's right. Yeah. Very good. So you got a couple of those custom work deals going and
yeah.
You know, there's something else there that I want to pull out of earlier from your story is that a guy might look at when you was doing all those cutting bulls on horseback and it was like that wasn't the end game. In fact, it probably wasn't the best thing that you were doing. It wasn't the thing that facilitated the healthiest lifestyle and healthiest relationships and mental health and all of that sort of stuff. But the skill set that you learned there has helped you here.
Yes.
Because, I mean, you can handle, like, you're the guy that they call and say, hey, I haven't touched these cows in 5 years. Can you go do something? Not everybody can do that.
No. That skill has opened a lot of doors for me. That's pretty much how I'm making a living now. I don't have to cowboy like I did. It's more important that I know who to call because I've done enough bad things and dumb things that I can't do what I once did. But I still understand the process.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the thing that I want to focus in on there is that just because something doesn't work out doesn't mean that it can't help you. And you know what I mean? We can look back on our stories and be like, gosh, that was a wasted 10 years. Well, not exactly.
No, the best. So if I hadn't lost that headquarters piece, I wouldn't have had time to say yes to taking care of that Hereford herd. I wouldn't have had time to clean up another deal that is substantially larger, that in ways is a better fit than the Herefords. There's lots of things that I wouldn't have been able to do if that hadn't happened.
And I'm assuming that some of those people that you work for give you some autonomy, some liberty in the way that you handle their cattle.
So I have the Hereford herd. I don't think those people, well, the son will come up and he'll see the cows and he'll drive through them. The sisters, I can't tell you the last time they've even seen a cow herd.
Right.
They want to know, really all they're interested in is what is their profit going to be at the end of the year, and what am I doing for their ground? Because they are concerned about that.
Which is a good thing to have from a landowner.
Absolutely. It makes my job a lot easier, because the better job I do on the grass, the more cows we run, the bigger my share. It's a compounding and cascading effect. And then I have another Red Angus operation that I manage that I have almost 100% autonomy. I set up when we're going to work the calves, where the cows are going, everything that's happening. I pick out the bulls. They're his cows, but it's my herd, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you're an asset manager.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know what stocks are in my 401k right now, but I pay somebody to manage that. And I think the thing that I'd like to draw from that is that there's probably somebody somewhere that's in a situation where they think, these cows are my only access to cows. The only way I can run cows is through this deal, is through this relationship or this operation or whatever, where I don't have any say because of somebody else, above me, la-di-da-di-da. And then here you are, you kind of went away from that and found your own thing. And now you have cows, you've accessed cows, you've accessed land, you have the autonomy to manage them the way you want. You're doing cool stuff. I mean, like you're using halter with some of them. And you also have the flexibility you're not so busy in Whitby and working in the business that you don't have time to do things like facilitate executive link meetings or, other things that are probably good that maybe you didn't have time for earlier.
Oh, absolutely.
And I also would want to say that this conversation has been about you finding another way than the way that you were brought up in and the way that seemed like the path forward. But I certainly wouldn't want to paint the picture that there's anything wrong with generational operations or anything like that. I just don't want people to feel like they're trapped in any circumstance.
No. A big part of the reason that I facilitate, and it has helped with healing of my heart and my emotion immensely, is to help family operations. And I would love nothing more for everybody to get to stay on their family place. If that could happen, if I could facilitate just one of those success stories, it would make everything that I've gone through worth it. But if they can't be saved, if it's not the best thing for everybody involved, let's figure out what is.
Yep, that's right. What else? What have we missed?
Hell, I don't know.
Well, I just am tickled to have you on here because, again, I don't come from a full-time ag family operation, and this conversation certainly doesn't have anything against them. And I think they're great. And I think also that those operations have their own set of problems, that are very different than the problems that I have or you have. We all have problems. We all just have different flavors of problems. But I just really was excited to have you on to talk about, if what's going on is not working, you can figure it out. You can do something different. And I think also in your story, like we've said, there's evidence that even in the things that in the long term weren't going to didn't work out, there's still a skill set there that you can take somewhere else. And gosh, I mean, the whole premise of the Ranch Rolodex is to connect people. And I wrote that down listening to your story. There's a lot there where you connected with people that helped you. And so that's what we're trying to do is to connect people with people, share people with the world that have helped us. And hopefully we can all get a little bit better from this deal.
Well, that sounds great.
We talk about when we evaluate businesses, would you invest, in the dollar figure is always a moving target because $100,000 might not be that much money anymore. But would you invest $500,000 in this business, la-di-da, when we're going through our executive link meetings? If you were going to invest $500,000 in a business, what would you look for?
I want to sit down and have a meal with the people that own it. I want to know how their family life is. I want to know how they treat other people. And I want to know what their moral principles are. All that other stuff can be taught. Those are the things that matter. And then a willingness to be wrong, but a willingness to accept the consequences of being wrong. So I want to back up just a little bit. You said that you don't come from a full-time operation.
Right.
I have been full-time forever. but I've always had side gigs and other jobs, whether it was running custom cattle, doing day work for somebody else. I rode pins at a grow yard for a little while. I helped a buddy that had a right-of-way crew for a while, welding corners and such in. The cattle was always my primary, but a lot of times I had to live off what I could make scratching up other places. So don't think that I all made it all from a cow herd or from sell by marketing. A lot of it just surviving just came off of sweat.
Yeah, hustle.
And then along those lines, I think one of the most important lessons that I ever learned is that you have to pay yourself. Not just pulling enough to live off of, not just enough to say that you've done it, but you actually have to pay yourself what you're worth, or you'll never be worth anything. For me, it was a huge emotional weight lifted off and a huge confidence builder to just be able to write myself a check every month that covered more than just beer.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think that changes one's how they view their self-worth. You know what I mean? And it probably, like a mission and vision, helps you quit doing some things that you shouldn't be doing because you cost too much money to be doing that.
Absolutely.
You know? Yeah, that's a very good one. And I think the last thing that I would comment on that is that plays into the individual that's working in town while they build their ranch. And, you know, man, don't have any shame doing that either, because that's what you're describing is off-farm income, basically, that you were living on while you were building the business. Toby, it's been great. I think that people can learn a lot from your story, and I'm glad to be able to visit with you and share it.
Well, thank you, Derek.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Ranch Rolodex. Remember that success in ranching and in life is rarely built alone. If this episode brought you any value, subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with someone who would benefit from it. Find us on Facebook and Instagram at the Ranch Rolodex for more conversations, behind-the-scenes content, and resources for ranchers. Until next time, we hope you learn from those ahead of you, encourage those beside you, and invest in those behind you.